So welcome back to the channel. Today I thought I would do a little bit of a race recap and sort of reflect a little bit on the Barcelona half. It's now been about a week since I did the race, and I wanted to sort of go over my training going into it, because there was a few things that I changed in the hope to sort of share some tips and tricks that people can apply to their own training, but also selfishly sort of reflect on what went well for me in the build, so then I can hopefully apply that to my next block of training, which is the London Marathon, which is in 8.5 weeks time. Realised that making a coffee is probably one of the noisiest things I do. Big thanks to everyone who watched the Barcelona vlog. I think it's one of the most popular race vlogs we've put up. It was really fun going out to Barcelona with Meg and Charlie and Amelia. And I mean, I did all right in terms of the running. Ran a personal best by about 53 seconds, I think. Running 1 hour, 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Good coffee, nailed that. So the first thing I wanted to do is sort of like go into a little bit of a race recap. On the day, it was pretty perfect conditions. I think it was like 10 degrees in Barcelona. There was absolutely no wind, so it was a day where, like I think I said in the race vlog, pretty much everyone I spoke to had got a PB. Conditions couldn't have been any better. Apart from maybe the start of the race for me, personally, I started in the yellow wave, which was just behind the elite runners, which is where I was seeded. In hindsight, it would have been nice to have been in the elite category, so I could have started a little bit closer to the front, but I think, I'm not sure if I had the qualifying time or not, but it just meant that because I started in the yellow pen, there was runners that could run anything from 65-minute half marathons to an hour and a half half marathon. So it's a little bit congested. It's always a little bit push and shovey when you start in sort of the masses rather than in the elites. The first sort of 5 kilometers of the race were a little bit crazy, but by about 5 kilometers I found myself in a really strong group. I think there was at least 10 runners from memory that had sort of started running at around 3:08 per kilometer, which is maybe a touch quicker than I planned to go. Talking to my coach before the race, we were sort of thinking around 3:10 per kilometer. So 3:08 was the group that I found myself in, and I sort of just tucked in there for the first 5 to 10k. I was pretty fortunate that I'd found a group that were going at the pace that I wanted to, and the pace was feeling pretty good. Then between sort of 10 and 15 kilometers, I can remember really thinking, this is feeling great, but I need to stay sort of present in the race. It's more of a mental thing for me. Between 10 and 15, you sort of have to prepare for the latter stages of the race, where I've done half marathons before, and from 15 kilometers, it really starts to hurt. By the time I got to sort of 18, 20 kilometers, things were still going really well. I hadn't really experienced too much of that pain that I was expecting to sort of experience. Aerobically felt really strong, had a little bit of a wobble, I think at around 19 kilometers, where there was basically a little tiny incline and I almost lost my footing, and my headspace sort of went, oh, imagine if I'd fallen over and if I'd hit the ground, and I kind of lost focus. The group that I was with got away from me ever so slightly, but I quickly snapped out of it. By the time I looked at my watch again, it was like 20 kilometers, so 1 kilometer to go, and I was able to push for the fastest kilometer of the race. I think I finished in 2:58, which is around my sort of 5k, 10k pace, which is a really good sign that I'd paced it really well. And yeah, came across the line in 66:23, which is my fastest ever half marathon. Was absolutely over the moon. It felt comfortably hard. It never really got to that point where I really had to dig deep, which is always nice in a race when it goes so smoothly. So I talked a little bit about the race itself, a bit of a recap, but I wanted to sort of go back a little bit further to look at the training block and go into 3 things that I wanted to sort of highlight in the build that I think led to the success of running what ultimately was probably my best race that I've ever run. Definitely the one that I'm most proud of in terms of the time. I think it, comparative to my marathon time and my 5k time, my half marathon is probably now my more impressive result, and one that I would say I'm the most proud of in terms of the achievement. So the first thing that sort of led to such a good result in Barcelona was the consistency of my training, which I know is what everybody always goes on about, but for me, I was able to build on from my training block for the Valencia Marathon, which ended in December. I took some good time off over Christmas. We went to Australia, which was great. That period was really good for not only my body to sort of recover from the marathon, just mentally resetting and sort of being excited to start training again. Sort of building on from Valencia was one of the main things I was able to sort of take that fitness from the marathon and then apply it to the next block. One way I like to sort of track my training volume is through my watch. I am a Coros sponsored athlete, but I just wanted to go through one of the features that I use. Obviously, I use my watch like any normal runner would do in terms of tracking my activities when I'm out on the run. But when I come back from my run, I like to look at this feature on the Coros app called the training status, which basically uses two metrics. You've got two lines here, a load impact and a base fitness. You can see over time my load impact, which is basically the amount of training I'm doing. It's calculated daily, and that's why you can see these fluctuations in the blue line, and then the base fitness, which is basically how fit I am. And as my load impact goes up, my base fitness will follow in that trajectory as well. The reason why I really like this training status feature on the Coros app is it allows me to sort of get a brief overview of my training, especially using the sort of 90-day feature. One thing I look at is my load impact. I like to see that blue line go beneath the green line, which it did before the Barcelona half, which basically means I'm really fit, but my legs are starting to freshen up. And for race day, you want to have a good level of fitness, but you also want to bring that freshness up as well. There's no point being really fit, but your legs are absolutely knackered. You kind of need to have both fitness and freshness. So another reason why I think the Barcelona half went so well is because I introduced a few new things into my training. Looking back at some training blocks in the past, I felt like my training has kind of stagnated a little bit. So I think the introduction of new things, new stimulus can really help lead to more or different adaptations going into a race. So there are three kind of new things that I did before the Barcelona half. The first was hill sprints. In my training, I was doing one hill session per week, which I think really helped improve not only my efficiency and strength, but my sort of top end VO2 max. When you bring up your VO2 max, you can then improve your half marathon pace, which I think is one of the main reasons why I was able to sort of push the boundary of what I could sort of maintain for that hour distance. The second thing is heat training. Whilst I was in Iten, I was doing around 30 to 45 minutes of sauna a day. Heat training has also been found to improve the amount of red blood cells that you have in your body. Without getting too sciencey, the heat training basically causes your body to produce more plasma, which is the watery bit in your blood. And as your body produces more plasma, it then needs to produce more red blood cells to make the concentration basically of your blood the right consistency. So you produce more red blood cells just like you do when you're at altitude, and then your body becomes more efficient at transporting oxygen around the body. And then the third thing, the third new stimulus, if you like, was the altitude training. I've done it before, but never really raced immediately after the altitude, and I think looking back at the race, I could certainly feel the benefits of the altitude in terms of how efficient I felt. Aerobically, the pace never felt too challenging, and I think the biggest factor of all the things I did in my training in the build-up was the altitude training. I built such a strong aerobic base training in Kenya that when it came to race day, 308 or 309 per kilometer felt the most comfortable it's ever felt. And one final factor that led to such a great performance in Barcelona was my diet and nutrition. One of the best things about being in Kenya is all of your food is looked after for you. So your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner is all cooked for you. And in Iten, the food is quite simple. It's rice, your lentils, your fresh vegetables. Looking back at my training block, there's no surprise that my performance also increases when I'm eating better as well. I noticed that I recover a lot faster, I absorb my training, and ultimately race much better. So I've definitely found over the last few years that when I really am a bit more conscious of eating healthily, less processed food, not drinking alcohol, I find that my performances often improve as well, and definitely saw that ahead of the Barcelona half. So that pretty much summarizes today's video. I think it's always important to reflect on both the good and the bad results and take the lessons into the next block. And that's definitely what I'm going to be doing now, looking ahead towards the London Marathon. In the next sort of 8-9 weeks, my training is going to get a lot more marathon specific. I'm looking forward to documenting some of that on the channel. The competition winner that I held on Instagram to sort of predict my time has now been notified, and yeah, aspire to run to inspire, and we'll see you in another video soon.